Assalamu alaikum. I got the question, how did I join the faith of Islam? And was I always someone who was religious or believed in God? And as they say, it's a long story, but I kind of thought I wanted to present it. I have a lot of, I've had a lot of personal reflection about my journey, and I've written a lot about it. So I actually wanted to not just answer, just normal dialogue or monologue in this case, but to kind of read some of the things that I've written. And I think my first moment of any sort of spiritual awareness or, the first spiritual thoughts that I ever had were in my early teens, 13 or 14, I remember. I'm pretty sure it was when I was in eighth grade. And we used to go to church every Sunday, at least. And in the morning before, like, let's say the main service, there would be these kind of separate meetings, and there was a youth group as one of them which I would attend. And now, first of all, some people who see this may know which church I used to go to at that time. And as far as the people are concerned, I feel like they're great people, nice people. A lot of good things even came out of that environment socially. But I just remember at that time thinking, I don't believe in this. Not in an angry way, not in a resistant way, like but just almost instead of it being against something, it was more like the lack of anything, like the lack of something. I didn't feel I didn't feel that I believe it, let's just say. So it wasn't so much that I disbelieved as I didn't feel that I believed, like I didn't feel anything. And I think that was, when you're a teenager, you're kind of coming into that awareness of yourself and starting to define yourself and think about who you are instead of just kind of being what you're around, right? And that thought or that feeling kind of disturbed me, to be honest, because it was basic. It was one, it's like it's bad to be atheist. I'm not saying it is, I'm saying that was my impression. And it's like, well, I'm not atheist. Like, I don't want to be an atheist, let's say. And I shouldn't be an atheist, was my feeling at the time. But looking back, I can see that what I didn't believe in wasn't God making me an atheist, but it was the church itself. Just like what was happening there, I just didn't feel any sort of conviction about it. We would be in these what they called praise services, where you would be singing songs as a congregation before there would be the preaching of that Sunday or Wednesday. I think we used to meet on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday. And everyone would stand up and be singing these songs, and I would stand up, but I was just mouthing the words, and I don't think that I realized right away that I was mouthing the words, but I wasn't singing them because they weren't coming out of me. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of where I was starting as a teenager. And that, I won't say that that began my journey towards something, but I think it almost really, in a way, was my awakening, right? And so I have this poem that I wrote much later called With Open Eyes. When I was born, my eyes were closed, and I was told what I would see. Then later, when they opened, I didn't look, I believed. Then I started to see and look and read and think and remember. Words made things complicated. The truth I saw was clearer. So I went to the teachers who taught, and I said, I don't see what you teach. They said, that's okay, son, neither do we. Forget what you seek and believe. I said, if I close my eyes again and ignore the truth for your sayings, then surely would I be lost. So I left to find the way. And when I'm saying that I left to find the way, I think it was more of a mental and definitely an emotional disassociation, as well as something where I was just really kind of intellectually open. So even when I was in high school, I kind of had an interest in the exotic, but it wasn't a fetish for the most part, I don't think. I think it was that there's something out there. So when I feel that I'm encountering something which is from out there, not here, not what I'm used to, that I'm not really, getting anything from, then that must be where what I'm looking for is. Now, I wasn't always consciously searching for the truth, but I did always have a curiosity, and I think a profound, even openness, where I was always going to consider ideas, viewpoints, even. Just aesthetics. Um, so I started my first year of university at Duke. I went there for 1 year. And I remember even there, like my first semester, I took a Religions of Asia course, which was what it says it was. And it turns out that the person teaching that course was a convert to Islam. And I remember him saying that, just strangely, I had no interest in Islam whatsoever at that point, but I do remember him saying, I was not interested in Islam, but I converted in order to get married. However, as I've studied it, it's something that I've become convinced by. So I remember that, but I was actually more interested in, again, the things which felt exotic. So on different levels, and even perhaps to a somewhat superficial level as well, you do see something very different out of religions that come from what's called Asia. And I found the most boring units of that class to be the ones with which I was most familiar. So, of course, you know, the the Syrian Levant, Sham, right? Greater Syria, Palestine, Jordan, uh, Syria, Lebanon are part of Asia. So we studied, Judaism and Christianity as well. And I was like, man, I already been through this. I wanted to study like the stuff I don't know, like what are all these figures and these like blue gods and all this type of stuff? Like, this dude got dreadlocks. Like, what's that all about? I was kind of like more into that, and even you might say to a certain extent Buddhism. But again, these were at that point really pure intellectual curiosity, where perhaps looking back, I might say that at a more subliminal level, I did have, you know, a feeling that I was trying to find something. And I even took like, art. I studied art from different places. And when you go far enough back in time, what people consider to be art is essentially, a lot of it is religious iconography, or things that are related to religion. So it's very clear to me, looking back, to me, it's somewhat at the time, probably most likely to others as well, that I had this type of interest. But like I said, I was at Duke and I did take these courses, but as far as the environment is concerned, it wasn't really anything that I went there with the intention to party, and I did, but it's kind of like you're in a very small town. It's not even a college town. It's like a college with a town around it, sort of. So there really wasn't anything to do in Durham, North Carolina, besides Duke for, an 18-year-old who wasn't from there. And I just felt like, man, there's got to be a lot more out there. Like, and I was into college for the experience, not for, like, I didn't have any sort of idea of a career. And I remember I didn't even know that I needed to choose a major until it was announced during my third semester of college that, this week is choose your major week. I was like, what? But skipping a bit ahead, after those 2 semesters that 1 year, I transferred to Columbia. And I just felt like actually I had this inclination the summer before I started college, because a friend of mine uh, that I used to like study with and stuff in high school had uh, started going, she had enrolled in Columbia, let's say, in the high school. And I just remember that summer looking like, um, man, I want to go to New York. So I kind of had already decided to go to Columbia really before I even started studying at Duke. And I don't know when I was fully aware of it or ready to admit it to myself, but I applied, I got in. Um, and that was, I would say where if you're not spiritually directed and committed, um, I think that part of my search was just to know and to experience. So I really got into a lot of hedonism. And it wasn't as though I was not continuing to pursue things intellectually, even on different levels, like, exploring through music a lot of thought and, just kind of informally meditating, whether that's listening to music or not. I mean, I did drink, but sometimes people kind of ask, like, are you a drinker or a smoker? I was much more of a smoker in the sense that, that was more of a daily thing. And it wasn't just about like getting high and goofing off. It was really, I mean, I think I just wanted to think and I wanted to kind of observe the world. And that's why I went to New York, because it's in my imagination, and it turned out to be correct. It was a hub where anything that's going on in the world you can get connected to through New York, and anything that's going on in the world is coming in and out of New York. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, but there was that hedonistic aspect too. I remember when, but not why. Half high, half dead. Eyes down, face frown, cloud in my head. Devil in my bed, often slept with the enemy. Looked at the mirror and said, you ain't a friend of me. The mirror said, get it while it's good till you don't want it no more. I ran so much game, I found out I was a hoe. I mean, whore. I abhor what I used to adore. I used to party till I passed out, dead on the floor, saying it was all good, but I was bad to the core, coughing up blood, asking what the fun was for. You think a fool's cool? Now I bet you ain't so sure. And I wouldn't say it if I hadn't done it before. Illegal aliens stranded on Australian shores, planting my flag all over Europe on a 3-week tour. Before that, I took a big bite out of New York, school and college kids at Duke and Carolina North. Austin, Texas is where I was raised and born. So yeah, I just kind of went through my autobiography to the up until that point, even skipping ahead to when I did stay in Australia. I went there as an exchange student, and I ended up staying for a year and a half rather than just that semester, really because I felt like there was something that I needed to finish. I felt like there was something that I needed to become. And I felt like I was becoming that, if anything, just because I had really stepped off for the first time that track, you know, where the at the end of the road they've paid for me, there's nothing but me. That's another line from another poem. There's just this road that's paved for you. You're supposed to, oh, you're reading above your grade level. Oh, you're going to go in talented and gifted classes, and you're going to do honors classes, and then you get to high school and you're doing pre-AP and AP, and what are you going to major in? What schools are you thinking about going to? I mean, I used to just I told people I was going to major in business. I had no intentions of it. It was just, if you say that to people, they'll leave you alone. You know what I mean? And I think I ended up majoring in sociology, and people were like, why? I remember one of my friends' moms was like, why? And I was kind of like, well, I can do whatever I want. First of all, I got to answer to you, but I didn't say that. I was just like, because it's interesting. You know what I mean? But even still, it was like, you're just doing exactly what you're supposed to do, and you're going to get a good job after this. And because of the college loan that you took, you're going to have a degree which will allow you to get a good job, and then you can use that good job to more easily pay off the loan because your income will be high. This whole thing, right? Like, um, go to a good school so you can get a good job, so you can get a good marriage, and put your kids in a good school so they can just repeat the cycle. But for what, right? Like, if it's a cycle, then it ain't going nowhere. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of what it was for me. So I just stepped off of that track, or you might say I just stepped off of that, um, that treadmill, right? That wheel that mice are on. It's like, what if you just step off of it? You know what I mean? And so I just stayed in Australia. I used the scholarship and aid and other money like that, where if you enroll for a semester, they send you all that money, right? But like, there's a lot left over, especially Australia is pretty cheap. So I basically had like a whole lot of money, and I just hardly ever went to class. I was really just, like I said, there to experience life. I mean, I did continue to do this kind of spiritual exploration, even in a in that academic setting. What little academics I participated in, but there was a class that I'll always treasure where we studied the spread of Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam. But each of those units of the course had a different professor who was a specialist in one of the given religions, right? And just that whole setup was like profoundly intriguing. And the way they discussed things was, also interesting. But again, it was really something where the way that I was interacting with it was purely at a, an intellectual level. Like, I wasn't like trying to like join anything, but being off that beaten path. I mean, when I was in Australia, at a certain point, to not make the story too long, I'll just skip to where I was in Perth, which is the west coast of the country. And Australia is about as big as the US. And we drove all the way up north, all the way across the country, and all the way back down to Sydney, where I had been living. And while Australia is as large as the United States, it only had 20 million people at the time. And 5 million of those were in Sydney. So, most of the country is empty. I mean, I almost feel like it was a reset because for the first time in my life, two things happened. When I very first got there, actually, we were in this kind of orientation for the international students, and it was outside of Sydney. We're staying in these cabins in a place called the Blue Mountains. And I remember I stepped outside, and when I took a breath, I was like, this is the strangest thing. It's like, this is like the first breath of fresh air I've ever had. Like, just totally, I mean, there's so many trees around, you know what I'm saying? And it was just like the purest air I mean, I felt how pure the air was. There's not really something that you feel exactly when there's pure air. I mean, maybe there's a bit of a rush from uh, you know, the chemicals in the plants or something like that. And then I realized this is the most valuable thing that I've ever had. This breath of fresh air that has stuck with me for the rest of my life up until now. That almost a sense of sorrow and rage that, like, why haven't I been breathing this all the time? Like, this is what I'm supposed to breathe. So it's kind of, like they say, it's the small things, but something about that just struck me like something's missing from my life. Like, I must be, my whole knowledge has some giant chunk missing because my experience has just, whatever I've done, I've been deprived of this. So what could I really know? What could I really have done? Like, what do I have to be proud of? Like, how much am I missing? Like, how much have I been misled and misdirected? And another one of these types of experiences was in Warura Station. Try saying that 3 times fast. Where basically, back in those days, you used to travel with this book called Lonely Planet. You know, it had maps, it had a directory to every hotel with like reviews of it and stuff like that. But you got around by that, you know, and then you'd buy your own local maps and stuff like that too. So there was a place like a guy had 250,000 acres, the western boundary of which was the Indian Ocean, right? And I mean, he just basically, I guess he just had a bunch of sheep. And we asked, when you enter the land, you know, you meet the guy, he kind of has a little homestead there. And I think he doesn't give you anything but water, but you need to have your own container and permission to use his land. So you pay him for however many days you want to, you know, be there, and then you go. And he said, yeah, you know, he has sheep somewhere, but he has to get on a helicopter to find them because it's just, like I said, 250,000 acres. So we drove, and you're on that, you know, that it's bumpy because that desert sand ripples, and it's just like the desert sand opens up into beach sand. And by the way, you know, there's kangaroos the whole way. They just jump out of the desert right onto the beach, you know. Um, but once we got out there, we were, as far as we could see, that might be the sound. There's supposed to be a meteor shower tonight. I want to pause and try to take a look around because I hear something booming. Those are supposed to be meteors.